What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of On Cue. I'm your host, Rich Quinones, as we are brought to you by our wonderful friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemensville Road. Check them out online. You can walk in. They have all the snow equipment, all the accessories, 20 to 30% off. And of course, you might be able to sneak in there probably in another couple of days and get maybe your Kansas City Chiefs merchandise. Victorious over the San Francisco 49ers. Super Bowl is in the books. I thought Vegas did a wonderful job, and I thought the game itself, I guess we can say, kind of lived up to the billing, but Super Bowl 58 put a bow on it in overtime. Kansas City 25, 49ers 20 to our good friend Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029, the game, part of the Broad Street South Network, kind enough to join us. And listen, there's so much to get into with this game, a game that I thought at first was just a snooze fest. It looked like it was going to hit the under. It was going to be boring. And then once again, picks up, revs up, in that third quarter, that fourth quarter, back and forth. And let's just start with the obvious. And that was the decision for the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan to take the ball first in overtime against Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes. There was a lot of talk of, not understanding the rules, and we'll get into all that. But again, Lloyd, the decision, Shanahan, they take the ball first. They don't get the touchdown. They get the field goal. Kansas City goes right down the field. They ultimately get the touchdown to win it. So do you have a problem at all with Shanahan getting the ball first in overtime?
Yeah, Q, it was interesting because, it was only Fred Warner out there for the Niners, and then you had Mahomes on the other side for that coin flip. And you hopefully Warner knew all the rules, knew what to do, and knew what Shanahan wanted. But we have to assume this was the coach's choice, that he wanted the football. And if you know the new rules, even if you score a touchdown, the other team gets the opportunity. It's not like the game ends, not like the old days when you and I were watching of sudden death or anything like that, even on a field goal. And, just knowing Mahomes had an opportunity, and as well as their defense was playing, why not put the defense on the field and then kind of see what you need? Do you need a field goal? Do you need a touchdown? But the Niners, he wanted to go for it. He thought his defense could stop them, even if they put up 3 points. Unfortunately, I think both defenses did a nice job early, but a little gassed at that point in the game.
So a couple of things. Listen, I was texting my buddies and I got confused at first, full disclosure. And everyone was killing CBS in the broadcast. I rewatched the game last night, Monday night. They clearly showed the graphic on the
Yeah.
rules. So again, I mean, I looked at it like this, and it was funny because everyone's talking about when Kansas City scored, they're like, "Oh my God, they're going to score right at the gun." Well, no, there was going to be another overtime period. So everyone's like, "Well, why
Yeah,
did
they
they
were gonna.
rush?"
Yeah, the
Yeah,
clock didn't
because
matter.
they probably didn't want to go to a TV timeout, switch fields, and have the 49ers have an opportunity to change their defensive alignment. So I understand all that. I have no problem with Kyle Shanahan wanting to take the football. My only gripe would be, see, we Monday morning quarterback. We all the same thing with Dan Campbell. We get on this after the fact. Why? Because it was the result. Because in our estimation, in our eyes, the right result didn't occur. Right. So I looked at it like this. He's probably thinking their defense was gas, and he kind of came out and said that.
Mm-hmm.
My only issue is if I'm down there knowing I need a touchdown, I can't, a field goal is not going to do me any good. I'm going for it on fourth down. I am. And then I'm going to have my defense make a stop. If they can't, so be it. That's my mentality, is because you've said
Right.
it. You've said it for years now with teams like New England in the heyday. We saw it with the greatest show on turf with the Rams. We're seeing it with Kansas City over the last 5+ years. 3 points doesn't beat you. You need points, points, points. You need 7 points. So again, that was my only little gripe. Andy Reid ultimately came out, and I guess the game plan was they were going to defer. So they were going to kick off because they realized if they got the ball back, they were
Mm-hmm.
going to go. And if they scored, the talk is they would have went for two. So think
Oh,
about that.
wow.
Think about that for a moment, right? So it's, and I pulled this up, and again, as I'm pulling it up, because I want to be clear for the listening audience as well. Did you have any problem? Again, do you believe what I'm saying? Do you agree with me that if anything, you go for it on fourth down?
Yeah, Q, you know what? I always said over and over with Holmes and Reed, you got to step on their neck when you got a chance. And they let them off the hook earlier where they had the 10-point lead. And I just knew kind of Q when that extra point was blocked and the
Huge.
Chiefs had the ability to tie the game and go into overtime, you knew the Chiefs were winning that game. And you hate to be like that, but just all the momentum and everything had turned to the Chiefs' advantage. And you just knew that Mahomes was going to find a way. And you're right. If they could put up seven's better on the board than three because even with Moody, that was kind of, roll the dice with him, even that short field goal. But you knew Butker as well as he was kicking. He was going to be able to tie it with the field goal. It could be even a 60, 70-yard kick. And Mahomes, like we knew he was going to do, he took it and he just drove it down the field because he wanted that win and they would have ended it there. So, I have no problem for him not he should have went for it, in my opinion, because three probably would not be enough, given that
So,
they had another possession.
so to clarify, Mahomes basically said Chiefs would have gone for two conversion if 49ers have scored a touchdown. Let me just clarify that. So, point
Right.
being, if they went for it on fourth down, they scored, and the Chiefs get the ball, they're going for two because they want to end it, which is crazy. So this is what he said, quote, we were going for two, Mahomes said on ESPN Sports Center when asked about the team's decision after potential game-tying touchdown by the Chiefs. I don't know if head coach Andy Reid wants me telling everyone, but we would have went for two for sure. Obviously, they didn't need to go for two because the 49ers settled for a field goal on the opening possession before Mahomes was able to hit Hardman for the game-winning touchdown. And again, the rules for those not familiar, the NFL playoff overtime rules were widely discussed after the game as a rule change instituted in 2022 allowed both teams to have a chance to possess the ball before the game finished in the regular season. The contest would end if the receiving team scored a touchdown on the first possession in overtime. So in layman's terms, in other words, if Kansas City still would have gotten an opportunity with the ball if the 49ers scored a touchdown after receiving the kickoff to begin OT. But then I would have argued if you're San Fran, you go for two if you score. I think about it like this. When you're in these moments and you're going up against a team like Kansas City, let's just say we're in overtime. The 49ers, they score a touchdown, right? They get on the board. We don't have to worry about the field goal. Now you go for two. You get the 2-point conversion. It's pretty clear, cut and dry and simple right now. Even if Kansas City scores, they still have to convert a 2-point play. They still have to convert a 2-point try. This is on the premise that the 49ers have already did it and they're up by 8. That's a lot more pressure if you happen to give up a touchdown and the chances of them converting a 2-point play, sometimes they're not always in your favor, so to speak. And then the fact that Kansas City would have done it, it just shows that even prior to all this, they knew the rules. The 49ers were confused by the rules. It seemed as though Shanahan maybe panicked a little bit, and I think it was more or less that the defense was tired. The players came out, they were kind of confused. Andy Reid's talking, players are talking, Kelce and Mahomes and all the players are talking about, we go over this stuff in training camp, in OTAs, and during the regular season, in the preseason. This is constantly driven home. We're schooled on this. So that tells me just the class of coaching that Andy Reid's at, and then the work that Shanahan needs to do. And by the way, 3 Super Bowls now when he was on that Atlanta Falcons staff. 25-3, they blew that one. They blew a 10-point lead a couple of years ago to Kansas City and blew another 10-point lead to Kansas City. Correct. So, that's my thought on that.
Yeah, Q, and that's what you get with the Chiefs, the total picture. Mahomes did say, as you were saying, I watched all the post-game interviews, he was saying, we went over and said nauseam. He's like, I was almost tired of hearing about it because I didn't think it would happen. But sure enough, it happened. And that's what the great coaches, as you said, they used to always say Shula. And I talked to some of the old guys that were on the Steelers with Chuck Noll. They said he was ridiculous in terms of his preparation and contingencies and what could happen sometimes would happen. And the same thing with Belichick and the Patriots. these great teams that we're talking about, these dynasty type teams, they are well prepared for these situations. And then when they get in these situations, they just perform at such a high level. And also they're surgical in terms of their quarterback. And that's what Mahomes did.
That's the other thing.
He's an extension of Andy Reid on the field.
Yeah, that's the other thing. And you're right. I mean, they're running these scenarios through their mind and through their head in case they happen. And that shows, I mean, Andy Reid's an all-time great head coach, Hall of Famer. There's no disputing that. But again, if you kind of take it down to the field for a moment, that's why I believe you take the ball. And that's why I believe you go for it on fourth down, because you know a field goal is not going to win you the game. It's not. It's just it was inevitable that the Chiefs were going to go down the field, and they converted third downs. They converted, I think, a fourth down as well. I mean, it was inevitable. Even the fourth down play with Mahomes kind of running off tackle is a brilliantly called and executed plan. And I thought there were a couple things, and it's almost like the Lions game where we want to pinpoint a couple plays. But McCaffrey fumble early, the muff punt, the blocked extra point. I mean, right. I told you this. I thought special teams was going to have a hand in this game. So the 49ers had some self-inflicted wounds, and I thought Purdy played well. I thought he was poised. I thought he missed a couple throws here and there. They weren't able to get Kittle involved at all. I said Friday they needed to have Debo and Christian McCaffrey at least combined for 40 combined touches. Run these guys into the ground, and Debo's always getting banged up and hurt. We know that. They didn't do that. They couldn't get the tight end over the seam route. They couldn't. They started to make adjustments defensively, but then offensively, they totally steered clear of the ground game, which played right into Kansas City's favor. I mean, Kansas City's second half defensively, Spags, I don't know if you can stick a defensive coordinator in the Hall of Fame, but his game plan was brilliant. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, and I want to get your thoughts on this. There was a point in this game where you're Andy Reid, you know what Spagnuolo is going to do. You don't need to settle him down and burn a timeout. Shanahan had to settle down Wilkes and burn a timeout because he basically had to tell him, stop blitzing, stop selling out over and over and over. And every time they kept doing that, even when they were dropping back or trying to rush four, Mahomes was just kind of picking them apart. And that's right after the blow up with Kelce, which we'll get into. So, that tells you coaching in the NFL and the difference between a good coaching staff and a great coaching staff.
Yeah, Q. And it's 10-3 going into the half. Usher's coming out there, do his thing. But the Chiefs were doing their thing in the locker room. Andy Reid was with Mahomes and Spagnuolo's with his DBs, and they're just going over the scheme, what they need to do. Yes, they were down at that point. The Niners had kind of dominated on the stat sheet, but as you said, they did not capitalize on that bad interception by Patrick Mahomes and a couple other breaks that they had gotten. And you knew the Chiefs were going to come out. And Spagnuolo, as you said, a Jim Johnson disciple, he understands how to get natural pressure on a quarterback, scheme, scenario, shut down the Patriots in 07 and 11 for the Giants Super Bowl wins. Now he's just bringing that same kind of fire to the Chiefs and the understanding that he has of everything. And you're right. Andy Reid trusts him to kind of control his side of the football. And Spagnuolo, he didn't, when he got his opportunity to be head coach, not his thing. But as an assistant coach, a defensive mastermind, did a great job out there. And the Niners did panic at certain points in this game. McCaffrey did get his 30 touches. He had 22 rushes for 80 yards and 8 catches in this game. But the thing was, Q, he was kind of gassed and beat up at the end of that game. You could see he did not have much left. Bolton had 13 tackles, and him and Chris Jones and the guys were hitting him early and often. But the Chiefs just had an answer in that second half, in particularly Mahomes finding a way to get it done. It's almost like inevitable, as you said, almost like you remember Jordan back in the day when they were on their run, that second three-peat. You're like, this team's going to find a way to get it done. Yeah. And he's just masterful.
Yeah. And to your point, McCaffrey would have been MVP. Jones made some, I thought, altering hits on Purdy when he was in the act of throwing, missing Debo a couple times. But think about this. In this game, right? Feeling out process, punt, punt, punt. 49ers get the field goal. Kansas City fumbles. The 49ers can't do anything with it. Then Kansas City punts. 49ers do cash in. 49ers then give up the 3. You go into the half. And then I kind of thought the complexion of the game, the third quarter, the 49ers once again, force a punt. They get the interception. They can't do anything, right? The pick and coming out in the third quarter, they punt. Kansas City gets it. They punt. 49ers have another opportunity. They punt. They just allow Kansas City to stay in the game. Then it's a field goal. Then it's a 10-6 game. These are the second half adjustments, longer halftime intermission in the Super Bowl, right? You have Usher doing his thing. You have all the commercials. You have the elongated break. Boom. What happens? You let them hang around at 10-6. You force a punt. Then you get it back. And then boom, touchdown. And it's 13-10. And even though the 49ers came back, Kansas City came right back to tie it up. The 49ers take the lead once again. Then Kansas City comes back. I mean, you exchanging field goal for field goal against Kansas City is not going to get it done. And there were times in this game, you can look at their last 3 possessions. I should say their last 2. Well, let me say this. Defensively, this is where they got exposed, San Francisco. You're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4. Kansas City scored on 4 of their last 5 possessions in this game, not including overtime, which would have been 5 of 6. So it tells you everything you need to know about what transpired defensively in that second half. The 49ers were simply gassed. But again, I thought they should have run McCaffrey more. I thought they should have run Debo a lot more. They didn't. We'll get to Mahomes in a moment, but I have a real problem with Travis Kelce and the nonsense that he pulled on the sidelines. And I'm wondering, are we going to get that audio when he was mic'd up from NFL Films? I mean, I don't think under any circumstances you allow a player to do something like that. And, look, I get the frustration. I understand all of that. But, man, I'm telling you, if that's a Beckham, if that's a Keyshawn Johnson back in the day of Randy Moss, A.J. Brown even said it, and he's 100% accurate, right? I mean, let's call it the way it is. If that's a diva wide receiver, or if that's a black player, and I'm sorry people don't want to hear this, if that's a black player doing that crap on the sidelines, oh my God, it would have been a national friggin' story. And more importantly, if they would have lost, it would have been a national story. And I felt that it was a situation that was just glossed over. And good credit to Boomer Esiason for kind of digging and saying, hey, man, you can't do that. And again, I know people don't like to talk about these things and makes them feel uncomfortable. I really don't care. It needs to be talked about. But you watch Travis Kelce do that kind of nonsense. What are you thinking?
Yeah, Q. I was just like, what? And you could read his lips. He cussed him out too, And I can't believe Andy Reid allowed him to do that, to push him and talk to him that way. And I thought back, okay, the Andy Reid that I covered in Philadelphia, he probably wouldn't have, he would
Can
have
you
probably went
imagine
right
doing that
back
to a
at him.
Landry? Can you imagine doing that to a Lombardi? Can you imagine doing
No
that
way.
to Bill Parcells?
And
I
it would
can
have
tell you
mattered.
this. I had a former
Yeah.
player. I had a former player text me
Mm-hmm.
and said, if Kelce pulled that effing garbage like he did against the Ravens and then on the sidelines, he would have got his ass kicked. A
Yeah.
former player saying if they were teammates, he would have got his ass kicked.
Yeah, an old school coach and team, they would have taken care of that. But he's such a big part of their offense, and Andy Reid's now softy, kind of gentler, grandfatherly type.
But you can't
He
do
he
that
took
though.
it.
You
Maybe
can't.
they went in the locker room and yelled at him, but it's just something you can't do. And you clearly saw he pushed him. He almost fell over. He like dropped his play call off the street,
Well, does
and
AJ Brown
it was just a
Brown have legitimacy to what he's saying?
yeah, Q. There are a different set of rules for different players. and it's unfortunate. It's almost like I remember as a backup running back for the Cowboys falls asleep in a film session, he gets cut, and the same thing they said Emmitt Smith was also taking a snooze too. So it was ugly, it was unneeded. He needed to calm down and hit in the first half. He wasn't doing anything. He had one target, one catch, 1 yard, and then he picked it up in the second half, and everybody's joking and having a good time because they won the game. But it should have been a bigger story, and uh, you just can't do that. And all the old players that I talked to said the same thing. Q. They were like, "What in the hell is going on there? How did they allow that?" It was just incredible.
I don't. I think it was very demeaning, demoralizing. I think it was extremely disrespectful. I think it was a lack of authority. If AJ Brown, use him as an example because he tweeted what he did. If he did this to a coach, we would call him what? I mean,
And they
let's
would
be
send him
honest.
off. Yeah.
A selfish. I pounded him when he went off on Jalen Hurts and they won that game, and I called him selfish. So what am I going to do? Is there going to be a double standard? And I'm not going to sit here and tell you what I think about what Travis Kelce did. I can't. That would not be fair. I would be hypocritical when AJ Brown got in that barking incident on the sideline, and Sirianni claimed he didn't see it and he wanted the ball. They won that game. They won that game against Kansas City. So he should have been happy. You're not going to get your reps. You're not going to get your stats. You're not going to get your numbers. Deal with it. I basically came out on BYP and on Q and said, look, he's being friggin' selfish, man. You can't have that. But what he's saying right now is 100% accurate. So for me to sit back from, the couch or sitting in the chair or high above saying, well, Travis Kelce's just a fiery player. No, man, what he did was absolutely disgraceful. I mean, I would have sat his ass, Super Bowl or no Super Bowl, all pro Hall of Fame tight end. I would have sat his ass. You showed up, the head coach, on a national stage in front of hundreds of millions, the most highly rated and viewed Super Bowl of all time. Great job, CBS, wonderful. But you pull this shit and then you sit there and you want to joke about it afterwards. I'm sorry. Like, no, there is a double standard, and the talking heads basically glossed over this because they want to push their own type of narrative and now sit there and say, they have this great father-son relationship. Come on, man. I can imagine doing that to my own man. I would have been put through a friggin' wall. I mean, let's just be honest
It
here.
was unnecessary. It was bad luck. The optics were terrible, and something needed to be more done about it. Q. And that's the new NFL. A lot of these players getting away with being a lot more mouthy than we've seen in
Yeah.
the past. And getting in the faces. There's no deference out there, and it's just too much. He needed to be disciplined, and there were a couple other pushing and shoving things that were allowed in the game. I think Snead hit somebody in the face, and they kind of.
Well, they
I
they
said
missed a lot
he
of
could be thrown
calls.
out the game for that.
Yeah, and let's be honest too. I mean, Kansas City held a lot. My buddy, who's a big time 49ers fan, who I've had to do wellness checks on him. In 3 Super Bowl wins, Kansas City has been called for offensive holding exactly 0 times. That's 13 quarters of football, not a single holding penalty. And my buddy's beside himself because he realizes that, again, you can't leave the game in the hands of the refs, and you got to take advantage of a situation when it presents itself. San Francisco is going to be kicking themselves, but Mahomes, I heard people sit there and say, well, see if they go back to back to back and it's a dynasty. What are we talking about? Like, do you know sports? They are a dynasty, and you have to incorporate how many times now have they been to an AFC championship? How many times now have they been to a Super Bowl? This guy's been to 4 Super Bowls. He's not even 28. He's won 3 of them, and he's won 3 MVPs. I mean, one more, and you might have to bump out number 12.
He'll be in a conversation. I mean, right now it's him, Montana, and Brady.
But that's back to
And
back to
that's some
back, though,
elite.
Lloyd. That's back to back
And
to back.
yeah, well, no one's ever done it in the Super Bowl era, so I don't think they need to do that to be known as one of the greatest teams ever. Because right now, like I agree with you, Q, that their dominance in this era of the salary cap era and free agency and all the things that can happen. Uh, they're a dynasty and they're a team. You're just like, wow, you just got to kind of marvel at them. You're like, this is very special. We have not seen this in a very long time in the National Football League. Back-to-back champion has not been since 03, 04. That's almost 20 years. And they're just special team. Yeah, they might be able to do it, the back-to-back-to-back, but we know there has to be some defections out there. It could be Chris Jones, a guy who wants to bag. It could be injuries. It could be anything to stop them. So every year is different, but this team is one of the teams, one of the all-timers, and you have to say they have at least, 3, 4 Hall of Famers on this team.
Listen, we've seen it in baseball. We've seen the A's do it in the 70s. We've seen the Reds. We've seen the Yankees do it multiple times. We've seen this in baseball. We've seen it in hockey. We saw with those great Islanders teams of the 80s. We saw it with all those Wayne Gretzky teams with Edmonton and Mark Messier and Fuhr and all those guys. We've seen it in the NBA, right? Pardon me. Jordan did it 2 times. Could have been actually 8 in a row if he doesn't retire. To do it in the NFL. I mean, think about this now. If you go back, you look at the 60s and what the Packers were able to do. And the Packers had a chance, but then Lombardi turned around and he went to the Washington Redskins at the time. And that's when he was sick with cancer and he ultimately passed away. The 49ers. I mean, I know this game vividly. 88, 89, 90 at the stick against the Giants. The Giants lose Phil Simms after, going 10-1. Haas comes in. They finish 13-3. They go to the NFC Championship. Field goal after field goal after field goal. The fake punt. Then all of a sudden, Roger Craig fumbles. Taylor recovers. Matt Barr 15-13. The Giants win. And Pat Summerall's famous line, "There will be no three-peat." It's so hard to do. The Dallas Cowboys, those great teams.
Dallas was really close too, because the Niners loaded up in '95. They had probably one of the all-time teams ever. I was just telling my son about this. I said, the Dallas, they won 3 in 4 years, and the Niners stopped them that 1 year because Harper left, and the Niners got Dion. They had Ricky Jackson. They were loaded, and Steve Young, he finally got the monkey horse back, and they beat him. But then Dallas turned around the next season and they win it with Barry Switzer. So, it is just so tough to win 3 in a row in the NFL, let alone 2 in a row. And you have to tip your cap to them that they're back-to-back champions. We'll see if they're able to keep this going. Kelce was yelling 3 in a row. We'll see. We'll see. There's a lot of moving pieces to this, but Brett Beach, their general manager, has done a great job in terms of drafting. Andy Reid, he's just evolved, Q. I was saying on my show, the guy that I covered all those years in Philadelphia, he's just not the same guy. He's evolved with the game. He's gotten younger, over the years in terms of his relationships with his players. And of course, him and the quarterback and head coach, that marriage, it's like Bill Walsh and Joe Montana. I mean, it's like, wow, these two together are special.
Do you think, and I know I only got you for another minute or two, do you think that the way we have seen teams attack certain teams and at times let them off the hook, and then conversely at times maybe be a little too aggressive, do you believe it'll change the way now we look and view how we do our hiring in the NFL when teams put together coaching staffs, if they're looking for that more analytical, if they're looking for someone who is a little more aggressive? I mean, years ago, it was always you play for the points. You play for the tie. You don't throw the ball when you're ahead. Now, all of a sudden, it's you go for it on 4th down. You go for 2. You continue to attack and be aggressive. I feel as though over the last several years, because now analytics have played such a huge part in how we look at the NFL and how some of these coaches base their play calling on offense, their scheme, how they look at games, how they look at certain scenarios, right? Remember, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, what are you doing going for 2 in the 3rd quarter? You're chasing points. Now it's almost like the norm. If it's 4th and 3 on the 35 or 40, we're going for it on their end. If it's a 3rd quarter and we're only up by 6 and we score, hey, we're going for it to make it a 2-possession game, 14 points. You got a tie, right? So I don't know. Do you believe that what we've seen over the last several years, some of these coaches now and the way they put together their coaching staff, they want to make sure they're on the same page and they buy into, the analytics and being more aggressive and taking risk and taking chances, because the numbers speak for themselves, right? I mean, you back up those numbers with the stats and the conversion rates. But I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Q. I mean, analytics are here to stay. I had Mike Tanier on with me earlier, and he's one of the former Football Outsiders guys, and it's become a cottage industry. Every team has a department now, not just one guy. That looks at analytics down, distance, situations, what they can do, but ultimately, it's going to take that coach that has the balls to do it. To say, okay, I'm comfortable enough. I'm good in situation with my owner, my general manager, that I can go for it in these situations and be successful. And if I'm not, they'll also give me another opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
try it again. So I don't see analytics going anywhere. It was always Belichick had analytics. There was a guy named Ernie Adams on his staff. They used to say Ernie Adams had a phone up in the booth, and he would talk to Belichick in terms of the analytics of a particular play, a particular situation. So now it's more out in the open. There's a big, huge convention every year on sports science and analytics. I think it's up in Boston every year, and every team is really buying into it. So, it's just a more aggressive nature. But again, as you said, hindsight's 2020. Dan Campbell doesn't get it, and everybody says he's over aggressive, and they kill him. But I think if you ask all 32 coaches, a lot of them would have went for it in those situations. So,
San Fran, Kansas City, Baltimore, Detroit, Buffalo, Cincinnati. Those are pretty much, if you think about it, San Fran, Kansas City, Baltimore plus 450, plus 750, plus 900. Detroit plus 1200, Buffalo plus 1200, Cincinnati plus 1500. This is our, you got to be kidding. It's way too early to even think or talk about that. But on February 13th, listen, I mean, can the Kansas City Chiefs make another run here and get back to the big game and have an opportunity to win back to back to back championships?
it's going to be interesting, Q. They got to have help. They have to have to manage the salary cap. Remember, that Mahomes contract's probably going to have to be restructured because he makes a ton of money. They're going to need some of these younger guys to step up. Finally, the receivers did after dropping 44 passes in regular season to lead the league. But an interesting team we were talking about is the Bengals seem to be their kryptonite. So if Joe Burrow comes back healthy and they get their stuff together, they can challenge the Chiefs. I'm not sure about the Bills. And then the NFC, I think, is wide open. But it's going to be fun to see, can they put this together. And Q, let's not forget, at a certain point in the season, the Chiefs were having some difficulty. They lost to the Raiders. If you remember, that was a very bad game. That was their last loss. And then after that was kind of like a slap in their face. And then they kind of went on a run after that. That was the last game that they lost.
Yeah.
But, they can lose. And Mahomes, sometimes he gets a little far, like he puts the ball in bad situation, but it's not that often. And he wins close games. I think he's only lost 4 games where it was 8 points or more. So they're usually in these one-score games, and Reed and Mahomes find a way to get it done.
Yeah, you mentioned Cincinnati's really been his only kryptonite in these playoffs. Later in the week, we'll kind of get into a little more news in our backyard with the NFC East and the Philadelphia Eagles. And then we'll start to look ahead to the offseason. You got the draft coming up. We got some movement still with the head coaching carousel. We'll start to dive into some free agents. Maybe we'll do a little mock draft as well, but we got a lot of stuff to dive into. I thought the game itself was a very good game. I'm not going to put it there all-time great. I think people want to do that because it went into overtime and it's Kansas City and, the sexy pick and so many storylines, but it was an extremely entertaining game. I will say this, halftime show, nice to see Alicia Keys. I have no problem with that. I thought the best commercial was the Christopher Walken commercial. That was,
I did too.
did you
I think
really?
he's one of my favorites. I love when everybody's imitating him, and he has that shtick, the way he walks and talks. King of New York. I always love that. That was one of his great movies, and
So then,
you know,
for the final time, kind of in the Christopher Walken, uh, who was your lackey and who was the game ball? So,
well, Q, I think as we were hitting around, I mean, the game ball is very easy. You give it to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he's 3 time Super Bowl champion. Another comeback win. His numbers were impressive: 34, 46, 73 completion percentage, 33 333 yards, 2 TDs. He had that banner interception, but really it was him using his legs too. He had 9 rushes for
He
66
thought it
yards,
too.
and the key runs, as you said, in overtime on third down and that fourth down one that moved the chains. He just had that will to win and that gear, So naturally, he wins the MVP back to back, and we'll see if they're able to go for that three-peat. The Lackey, I, I was, I always said it was going to be Moody, but he missed his extra point. I'm not going to pick on him. He drilled a 55-yarder, but I'm going to give it to head coach of the Niners, Kyle Shanahan. I think, as you said, he made those 2 key mistakes. They wanted the ball and they took it in overtime, and then he didn't go for it, as you said, in overtime. So those couple things, and he just seemed flustered a little bit at certain key points in the game. You got to give him the Lackey. I mean, there really weren't that many guys that kind of screwed up. You could have also gave it to the DB troop, Daryl Luter, who the ball hit off his foot, causing that muff. That was huge because the Chiefs right away capitalized on it, and that really turned the game around. But overall, I'll give it to Shanahan.
Special teams, man. Special players, special teams. They make special plays, and you could argue the punter early on for MVP, which would have been crazy the way they were flipping the field. But we know it's a quarterback-driven league. Mahomes, Andy Reid, here we go. They hoist another Lombardi trophy. Don't forget, give Lloyd a follow on X at Lloyd Vance. Check him out. The show's going to be still in the off season on Mondays on 102.9, the game.
We're looking forward to it. We're still going to we'll talk combine. We'll get ready for the draft,
Perfect.
all the off-season news, and we'll keep it going on Monday nights.
All right, and we'll clean up everything later on in the week. We'll get into a little NFC East news and notes. We got the offseason coming up, pitchers and catchers in baseball, and then we got the NFL draft. And then, I mean, my goodness, we got March Madness. We got a lot of stuff as well, but you and I always love to dive in to a little pigskin in football. All right, my friend, appreciate it. Good recap. We'll talk later in the week, and we'll start to kind of look ahead, but we'll focus a little more on what's going on in the NFC East. Always appreciate a couple moments.
All right, Q, thanks for having me on.